So this level 2 agent is going to be a bit more complicated, obviously. And in this particular section, we're going to be building a test generation agent. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to literally be building what you see here. So just to jump back for a quick refresher to level 1, this was our level 1 agent, right? It was a task executor. It was very simple. We had PR review agent that was triggered by an automatic webhook. Okay, that came from the GitHub API. When that triggered, we listened for events on pull request open events. Whenever one of those events fired, we triggered the PR review agent. Okay, so we're going to be building off of that in a little bit of a new environment. We'll talk more about the setup for this in the setup section, of course. What we're going to be doing in this lesson is we're just going to be talking about the general architecture here, and then I'm going to actually demo what we'll be building. And I also want to talk a little bit about some of the concepts that you'll actually be learning. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize before we actually get into this is that agents are very expensive. Okay, so the previous level 1 section was fairly low risk, right? Task executors are not complex agents. Again, many people would maybe not even consider them to be agents. They would consider them to be workflows. But for the sake of kind of our 5-tier, our 5-level system, we still want to focus on some of those lower level use cases. But as we continue to climb up the levels and increase complexity here, there's a lot more opportunities to spend money on these APIs. I mentioned this in the level 1 section. Make sure that you have those billing limits implemented, whether you're using the OpenAI API, Anthropic API, or another model provider. You're really going to want to make sure that you have those implemented so that you don't get hit with any surprise bills. If you take care of that, you're going to be set. Just be aware that agents are expensive, okay? We're going to try and simplify things as much as we can, which leads me to another point, which is that everything that you see in these videos is very much designed to help for learning, right? We're really trying to drill individual concepts so that you can start to learn all these different building blocks of how to build agents. And the more building blocks you pick up, right, the more you're going to be able to kind of fit them together in creative ways and actually apply them to whatever your real world use case is. Agents are tricky because while there are kind of very common building blocks, it's also very bespoke to your particular workflow. So again, all of the content in the 5 levels of coding agents course that we're doing here, it is designed to teach you building blocks so that you can apply them. There are so many different ways that you can actually improve this particular agent, right? We're not trying to build, our own startup here that we could go, fundraise and build native. We're trying to teach building blocks. So we'll mention this throughout this section and the upcoming sections. There's a lot of opportunities to build upon this. Casey, we're going to give you kind of a foundation. And then if you want to kind of tweak and play around, which I highly recommend because that's how you're going to learn, there's a lot of opportunities to do so. Okay, so production grade systems are just going to have much more edge cases and be a little bit more bespoke to you and stuff. Okay, so just note those two things as we go through that. And let's actually address one more point before we start looking at this flow diagram. Dwarkesh Patel of the Dwarkesh podcast, very popular AI podcast, has this awesome post that I think is very important to think about as you're building agents. And it kind of piggybacks off of what I was just saying about how production grade agents can get very complex, have a lot of edge cases and all that kind of stuff, right? When you hire a real person onto your team, you're very patient in training them, right? You're willing to invest time into training that person so that they can be up to speed. They can get up to speed over time and gradually improve and become a more effective worker in your team, in your organization, right? For AI agents, we're much less patient about them, right? If an AI agent doesn't work once, we get really frustrated and we say the model sucks and all this stuff. Okay, you got to be patient. When you're building agents, you have to think of them very much like you're training a human employee, right? It takes iterations, it takes cycles, it takes effort. This isn't, these things aren't just plug and play magic. They're very much magic, but it takes a little bit of work to get to that magic. So as you kind of build these agents and as you're inevitably going to hit errors and you're going to have to go tweak your prompt and test the new prompt, and then that's going to fail and you're going to have to go do something else, right? Just get used to that. And I think that this post in particular is very helpful for kind of grounding that. Okay, so let's talk about this. We're going to be building our level 2 agent. Okay, this is the code. We'll talk more about getting this all set up in the next section. This is going to piggyback off of the PR agent, so we're actually going to add this new test generation agent to the previous one. So let's talk about it. Okay, so here on the left you can see this is that level 1 agent, right? This is the pull request that got triggered. Okay, we just talked about this. What we're introducing over here on the flow chart is the new behavior. Okay, so fundamentally what we're going to be doing is we're creating an agent that can generate tests in your code base. And this is a very helpful thing to learn, because tests are one of those things where, if you talk to developers don't always love writing tests. It's just considered to be kind of boring, right? People would much rather actually go ship cool features to users and whatever and not have to worry about tests. But tests end up being super powerful in a world where you have agents writing code, because it gives you sort of these verifiable pieces of code that agents can basically, go write a new feature, write some tests, and you'll have sort of, again, verifiable proof that those things are either passing or failing. And if they pass, that's great. The agent did its work correctly. If they fail, it means the agent messed up somewhere. It changed something maybe it shouldn't have. It has to adjust and things like that. So when you're building agentic coding systems, learning how to do tests is very, very helpful. It's one of those very core foundational pieces. And I think that tests are going to become more and more important as these models continue to get better. So that's one of the reasons why we've decided to build a testing agent for our level 2. Okay, so let's just talk about a high level about what's going on here. So the way we're actually going to introduce our testing agent is, in the previous level, we sort of talked about automatic triggers, right? So one of the key things with AI agents is trying to figure out, how do you activate these things? How do you let one of these agents know that they need to go do some work? Okay, and there's ways to do this automatically, which is kind of what we explored in level 1, right? The idea was we had some sort of server running that listened for events, and whenever one of those events got triggered, it would run the agent. But there are also manual triggers, right? Think again, take the real world analogy, right? Sometimes there are cases where, in the automatic case, maybe a customer support email comes in, and that's almost like a trigger, right? And maybe somebody on your customer support team goes and begins working on the issue, right? That's almost like the real world version of a webhook, right? And then there's kind of manual triggers where maybe you see something, say you're in charge of the company or whatever, and maybe you see something in your docs that are incorrect based on a recent change to, some software library you shipped or something, and you send a message in Slack or something to one of your teammates, and you say, hey, maybe it's whoever's in charge of those docs, say, hey, can you make this change? I just noticed it. And what that worker or agent is going to do is going to go fix it, right? And that's kind of a manual trigger. So one of the things that we're going to be introducing here is trying to teach manual triggers, just to give you more building blocks to work with here. And we'll show you kind of how these labels get added. But GitHub pull requests have this awesome feature where you can add labels. And so we're going to introduce two things. We're going to introduce an agent review PR label. Okay, and that acts as a manual trigger for the PR review agent. That'll make more sense later. This basically gives us two ways to activate this PR review agent. Again, that's the agent that we built in level 1. For level 2, we're going to introduce this agent generate tests label. And what this label is going to do when this gets added, okay, again, this is a manual process. This is something that you have to initiate. And again, we're just teaching that to give you more insight, more tools to work with in terms of triggers and when to know when to run agents. Okay, this is going to run the test generation agent. This is going to do two things, and this kind of gets into where the test generation agent is more of a workflow executor as opposed to a task executor, right? This agent, this was a task, right? Just very simple, kind of single line, very linear process, very simple, not complex. This one's not too complex, but it at least introduces a couple of steps. Again, you can dramatically increase the complexity here, which you will actually see when we do the level 3 project. What we're actually going to be doing in the level 3 project is building off of the test generation and basically taking the test generation agent from level 2 to level 3. So you'll see some increase in complexity there. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce something called gating prompting. Okay, so you're going to learn how to do gating prompting, which is something that's really important for AI agents. Okay, and that's kind of step one. So it's going to basically say, is this a front end task? Do we need a front end test for this? If yes, we're going to run the generate tests task. If not, we're just going to not do anything. Okay, and that's sort of a very basic gating prompt 101, which we'll show you how to do. This is also going to introduce a concept called prompt chaining, or some people call this sequence prompting or sequence chaining. But basically what's going to happen is this is going to produce some sort of result. Okay, so we are in fact calling an LLM here. And if we do get a result, one of the things that is going to get generated is a recommendation based on the pull request. Okay, based on those code changes, we're going to see if this thing can recommend to the next step what kind of tests should be generated. Okay, and so we're basically passing part of the result of a previous prompt to the next prompt. Okay, so from task 1 to task 2. Okay, so this is now a workflow, not just a single task. We're basically doing a chained prompt. Okay, so you're also going to learn about prompt chaining. Now, also in these prompts, you're going to learn much more about conditional prompting, rule-based prompting, things like that. There's a lot of different things that are going to be going on. You're going to learn about structured outputs with Zod. We're going to talk about things like the difference between, I think this prompt uses JSON, this prompt uses XML. So we're going to kind of talk about when to use each one of those. Okay, again, we're just continuing to expand your toolbox here, which is kind of our goal, right? We want to give you as many tools, as many building blocks as possible to go build agents, right? That's what this course is all about. We'll also talk about small, cheaper models versus larger, powerful models. We'll talk about using not just OpenAI models here. We're actually going to use Claude 3.5 Sonnet as well. Okay, so we're going to get into starting to use models from different providers and things like that. So that's pretty cool. We already kind of talked about testing. Okay, again, testing is just a really good way to verify the results of code generation tasks. This is going to come much more into play when we get to level 4, which is going to be kind of our most complex agent. That's when we're going to get into kind of text to feature generation to tests to PR review. We're basically going to have text to full feature with verification. That's a little sneak peek into level 4. So that's kind of what's going on here. That's kind of what we're going to build. Let me go ahead and actually demo this thing for you. So what I actually need to do here in the code base is I got to make sure the server is running. Okay, this is actually going to be different than what we did in level 1. So in level 1, we produced an Express server. This had no front-end facing code. This is basically a Next.js app with an API running. Okay, and what we've actually done is if we, and I don't want to talk too much about code. You know what? Actually, I'm going to skip code for now. We'll just do a demo, and we'll get to code in the setup and project sections. So what's going to happen here? I actually lied. We do have to make one change to our code. So watch what I do here. Okay, we're going to do a quick little demo of what's going on here. And let's just change this test to welcome to the level 2 coding agent lesson. And what I'm going to do, okay, and you'll see I'm on my dev branch. Again, we're working instead of off of a main branch, we're working on a dev branch, right? Because these agents are triggered by open pull requests. So we kind of need to work on a different branch. Again, we'll talk more about that in the project section. I'm just going to say tweak messaging. That's my commit message. Again, commit, when you start building AI agents and you start doing things like this, your commit messages start to become a little bit more important. So you want to make sure you put that extra bit of effort. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go open a pull request. Okay, so we're going to go open a pull request. This is obviously a pretty basic one. And what you'll notice, okay, and again, you can see my server is running. That's great. We're going to create that pull request. And what's going to happen? So this is going to look very familiar if you went through level 1, which I highly recommend you do. We're going to get our PR review agent working. Okay, so this is going to actually review our pull request. And under the hood, we're actually using Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So this is a demonstration of us being able to use, instead of the super expensive O1 model, it turns out that Sonnet, which is a cheaper, faster model by Anthropic, is actually capable of doing this task. Okay, so we've actually plugged that model in, and you see we're getting a basic little code review. Obviously, you could improve the prompt here and get better formatting and things like this. But again, this is just to be educational. I mentioned I would kind of point out areas in which you could kind of do stretch goals, try and improve the project, things like that. This is a great example, right? Maybe you want to customize your prompt, customize the XML. Okay, we talked about all of this in the last section of how to improve this. Okay, but for our purposes, right, this is a basic summary. Obviously, our change was very simple. What we can do here is we can actually go do one more thing, which is I actually want to change this to go to the About page, because I want to demonstrate manual triggers here. More messaging changes. We're going to commit this. Okay, so we now have a running pull request. So what you'll notice here is my commit change will come in. You can see it's checking for the ability to merge. You can see that new commit message. So suddenly this review is actually out of date, right? And this is why manual triggers can sometimes be helpful, because sometimes you actually just want to basically tell an agent, hey, I need you to run that task again. So the way that we've done that here is you'll notice pull requests have this thing called labels. Okay, and this is highly customizable, so it makes for a really nice way to integrate these manual triggers here. And you'll see we have one of these labels called Agent Review PR. So watch this. I'm going to add this label. You're going to see this is going to show up as added label. And what you'll notice is the code review is going to happen again. So this time, instead of it being an automatic trigger, this is a manual trigger. And see how fast that was, right? That's the power of using a faster model like Sonnet, okay? And you can see we're doing really basic changes, so there's not much to summarize. Frankly, this is a demo, right? We're doing demo stuff. But what we can also do is basically we can say, okay, my pull request is changed here. Let's actually go ahead. And you can see the bot actually removed this label. If I refresh this will go away. That was stale UI. What we can do now is we can select the generate test label. And what you'll notice here is you'll see that label got added. And you should see in just a second as our server hits that endpoint, it's going to say AI test generation in progress. So now we're generating the tests based on the changes in the code. And so in just a second here, we should hopefully see this is actually first running the gating prompt. So you can see this actually decided that we didn't need any tests. Okay. This is probably just due to the simplicity here of what we did. But what we could do, for example, right, maybe let's actually just change this to like a client page. Let's maybe add like a button here with some sort of click handler. Let's do you clicked me. Okay, we want to get rid of async because this is a client component. And we'll say add button with click. We're going to commit that. Okay, and what we can do is we'll refresh this, let that commit come in, and we'll see the AI may or may not decide to test this. We'll see if it does. Again, this is very dependent on how you write your prompt. So if you ever run into issues with this, where maybe it's not generating tests when you want it to, or maybe it's generating tests when you don't want it to, right? Those are all prompt things, right? That's all about giving the models better prompts. So you can see, okay, it looks like no test proposals were generated again. Let me try and cut to a case where I can actually get this thing to generate a test. And then I'll show you what that looks like so we can demo both. So sure enough, I found a bug. glad I got that ironed out before we put this project out for all of you guys. We should now effectively see the test generation actually get fixed here. Okay, so test generation was triggered by a label. You can see I added it right up here, right after a new commit. And boom. Okay, we got two tests here. So what's going to happen here is we can actually go see what the tests were. Okay, so you can see this actually edited an existing test based on the pull request. Great, so we have edit capability. It's also added a new test right here, okay, based on the changes in capabilities here. So what we did in our code was if I go back to that home page here, so what we did, we added a button here. We changed this from a server to a client page, changed some of the wording here. And so you'll see in the bottom left how I can pull. So what happened is our agent actually added code, right? You can kind of see it actually added. You can see we even got a new changes since you last viewed. We can even view changes. So if we actually go to the files changed, this is going to show all of the tests. So basically the agent actually committed code to our branch, which is really cool. So what we can do, we can actually pull in these changes. And then if I open up a new terminal here, do npm run test, this actually is going to run our test suite, which is really cool. And you're going to see all our tests passed. And that is because of the changes that the AI made, which is really cool. So that is a test generation agent at work, triggered via a manual trigger, doing things like gating. You saw this was actually the bug here. You saw, like, let's actually just really quickly before I end this lesson, let me show you an example of like, let's say we tweaked some back end code, which would be like this route. Let's just say I'm just gonna add a comment. This is a test. And what we should actually probably do is we should actually probably merge this. Okay, you don't really want to get these pull requests to be too long here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna merge this one just for the purpose of this demonstration here. And what I'm gonna do is I need to now go back to my code, add test comment. And the model, the gating step is gonna be smart enough to know that it should not actually write a test for this. Because in our prompt, which you'll see as we get into the actual project and based on the commit message, it's basically gonna be like, okay, I'm only supposed to test front end code. This is back end code. This is just a comment. We don't need a test for this. So we're going to skip. And you can see our AI code review is going to be in process as well, which we'll let run here. We get a little summary here. Boom, label. Let's add the generate test label. Let the gating step go. And then we should now see some sort of, this has been skipped, assuming that I actually wrote a good prompt here. We'll see if my prompting was good. It looks like my prompting was good. You can see we're skipping test generation. It actually gives us a reason for skipping that, okay? So that is what this gating step is, right here. This is the gating prompt, and it decided in that first instance I showed you yes, and that second instance I showed you no. Okay, so we're gonna go about building this in this lesson. This is going to be a fun project. Again, this builds off of kind of what we did in the level 1 project, and we'll be using this as the foundation of what we do in level 3. Okay, we're going to be taking this from to a more complex agent in level 3, and in level 4, we're going to kind of be doing something new and integrating all of this into one system. It's going to be super cool. Super excited for this.